Hey class, alright, so today we're going to talk about solving linear equations, and by the end of this lesson you should be able to solve linear equations. Now, when we're solving linear equations, of course the first question is, what is a linear equation? So, and even before we answer that question, we have to talk about what is actually an equation. Well, I'm here to tell you, an equation states that two expressions are equal, and it always uses an equal sign to do this. An example of an equation would be something like notice how I have an expression on one side, an expression on the other side, separated by an equal sign. And the key to an equation is that equal sign. So, knowing that the key to the equation is the equal sign, we can make a non-example, and of course that will not have an equal sign. Notice we have 4x plus 5 with no equal sign in this problem. That's just called an expression. This is an equation. Now that we know what an equation is, we can move on to a linear equation. All right, and a linear equation is an equation where the highest exponent is 1. An equation where the highest exponent is 1. So, if I wanted to give you an example of a linear equation, I would give you something like this: 4x plus 3 equals 2. If we look at our variables, x is our variable, we can see that the exponent of x would be a 1. So this is an example of a linear equation. A non-example of a linear equation is going to be anything with an exponent greater than 1. So a non-example might be 4x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 1. Notice this is still an equation because it has an equal sign, but it is not a linear equation because of that 2. So since this has a 2, it's a squared exponent, it is not a linear equation. Since this exponent is to the first power, it is a linear equation. Alright, so can we break this down even further? Yes, we can. Linear equations are broken up into 3 parts: the variables, the constants, and the coefficients. Alright? Every linear equation will have some combination of these 3 things. They all have variables, and a variable is a letter representing an unknown amount. A variable is a letter representing an unknown amount. The most common variable you guys have probably all seen is x. We also have constants in linear equations. A constant is a number that is not attached to our x, our variable, by multiplication or division. Only multiplication and division. It can be attached by addition or subtraction. So again, a constant is a number not attached to a variable by multiplication or division. Then we have our coefficients, which is a number that is attached to a variable by multiplication or division. Okay? Constants not attached by multiplication or division. Coefficients are attached by multiplication or division. Nothing else. So an example of this would be right here. You can see we have a linear equation. We have a variable to the first power. In this linear equation, our coefficient is the 4 because it is attached to the x by multiplication. We know that whenever a 4 is right next to an x with no sign in between it, it's got to be multiplication. So that's our coefficient. Our constant is the 3. It's over here without a multiplication or division sign around it. It does have subtraction, but we said over here subtraction doesn't matter, we're only looking at multiplication and division. So our constant is the 3 because it is not attached by multiplication or division. Alright, and we also have our variable, of course. Our variable is the x in the middle. That's kind of the centerpiece of our whole linear equation. Alright, how long will this take? Well, that all depends. There are several different types of linear equations. We have our one-step equations, our two-step equations, and our multi-step equations. As you might guess, a one-step equation takes 1 step. Two-step equation, 2 steps. Multi-step equation could be anywhere from 3 steps to 5 steps. And sometimes they get a little longer than that. The key to this, though, is the number of steps is determined by how many inverse operations it would take to get the variable alone. We always want to get our variable alone. Inverse means opposite. Okay, so inverse operations means opposite operations. Now, just a quick review of what opposites are in math. Opposites look like this. The opposite of addition is subtraction, and the opposite of multiplication is division. Okay, what's this actually going to look like? When are we actually going to do one? We're going to do one right now. So the first thing we're going to want to do is figure out what type of equation is it. Is it a one-step, a two-step, or a multi-step? Well, what do you think about this one? Remember, we're thinking how many steps is it going to take to get the variable by itself? How many inverse operations? All right, well, to figure that out, I want to know how many things are around the variable. So I'm going to look for constants and coefficients. In this problem, we have a constant. We have a coefficient. And we do not have a constant. So I'm going to cross that out. We have no constant here. Since we only have one thing, one coefficient, it's only going to take one step to get our variable by itself. Now we're going to look at this and figure out what our inverse operation is. We see that we have 4x. 4 is right next to x. That means multiply. And we want to do the inverse operation, so we're going to divide by 4. Whenever we do inverse operations, we have to do exactly the same thing to both sides of the equal sign. And that keeps our equation balanced. We know that 4 divided by 4 is going to give us 1. So we'll have 1x over here. We know that 12 divided by 4 is going to give us 3. And never ever forget, bring down your equal sign to get your answer. And our answer is x equals 3. Again, we know that this is a one-step equation because there is a coefficient but no constant. All right, and the others. You know we had more than just one thing. So we're done with one-step equations. Now we're going to look at this one. Again, we got to figure out what is this. Is this a one-step? Is this a two-step? Is it a multi-step? Well, I don't know. Let's figure it out. So when we're looking at this equation, we're going to, again, look for constants and coefficients. So look, going from left to right, I see I have a coefficient right here. So that's one thing. Going from left to right, I see I have a constant right here. So that's 2. And we're only looking at the left side of the equal sign here. So I'm not going to go over and look at that 15. So on the left side of the equal sign, I have one coefficient, one constant. Okay? That's 2 things. So it's going to take 2 steps to get that variable by itself. So this is a 2-step equation. Now we're going to figure out what are those 2 steps. All right. Whenever we have a 2-step equation, there's one very important rule. Our first step is always eliminate your constant. And we will, of course, eliminate our constant using inverse operations. So we're going to eliminate our constant using inverse operations. Our constant is the 3. So to eliminate that 3, we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. As you can see, that's addition. The inverse of addition is subtraction, so we're subtracting 3 from both sides. We know that 3 minus 3 is 0, so those are going to cancel out. 15 minus 3 is 12. Did we do anything to this? No, we didn't, so we're going to bring this down. Negative 4x. And of course, never forget to bring down your equal sign. Now if you notice, we're down to a one-step equation. We have a coefficient and no constant. One step. So our second step in our two-step equation is going to be eliminate what's left over, which is always going to be our coefficient. So first eliminate your constant, second eliminate your coefficient. Again, we're using inverse operations. This is multiplication. The inverse of multiplication is division. So I'm dividing by -4 on both sides. And x equals 12 divided by -4 is -3. And we can see our answer over here is correct. X equals -3. All right. One more, right? That's correct. We've done a one-step equation. We've done a two-step equation. And you can probably guess that this is going to be a multi-step, but we want to know how we know, not just guess. Okay? So, just like before, we're going to look for coefficients and constants. We're going to find out how many we have, and that's going to tell us, is it a one-step, two-step, or a multi-step equation? All right, so going from left to right, I have A has no variable, so that is a constant. My next one, that does have a variable, so that is a coefficient. And moving along, I've got another one here that does not have a variable, so that is a constant. I'm going to count these up. That's how many things I have to move. There's 3 of them, which means it can't be a one-step equation, can't be a two-step equation. It's got to be a multi-step equation. Whenever we have multi-step equations, we have another step in our process. Okay, so our first step is going to be simplify both sides. And when I say both sides, I mean both sides of our equal sign. And step 2 will be move all variables to one side. Alright, so let's take care of those 2 steps first. Simplify both sides is our first step. We're going to look at just the left side of the equal sign. So we're just looking right here. We have 4 plus 4x minus 1. Whenever we're simplifying, we're looking for 2 things. We're either going to have like terms or we're going to have distribution. When we look at this, we see that we have 2 like terms here. We have 2 constants. If we have 2 constants, we can put them together. 4 minus 1 is 3. So I'm going to bring that down. I didn't change this, and I didn't change anything else, so I'm going to bring everything else down. So that's 3. There's a plus sign in front of that 4x, so I have to bring it down with it. 3 plus 4x. Alright, and then my next one is the thing we can never forget, my equal sign. Right over here I've got 18 plus x that I also did not change, so I'm going to bring them down as well. Okay, so we're done with step 1. Step 2, move all variables to one side. I've got variable on this side, I've got variable on this side, so I'm going to move all of my variables to one side. Okay? When you're doing this, you want to do whatever is going to keep your numbers positive. If I subtract 4x from each side, 1x minus 4x is going to give me a negative 3x. So that's not what I want to do. Instead of doing that, I'm going to subtract x from each side. 4x minus x gives me 3x. That's positive. That's what I want to do. Alright, I've only changed this one and this one, so I'm going to bring everything else down. So I'm bringing down the 3. There's a plus sign in front of that. Equals 18. Alright, now I'm down to a 2-step equation. If you remember the steps for a 2-step equation, we have to eliminate our constant first, then eliminate our coefficient next. Alright, so to get rid of our constant, first we got to find it. Our constant's the one without our variable, that's right here. So I have to ask myself, is that a positive or a negative 3 right there? Well, I'm looking in front of it and I don't see a minus sign, so if there's not a minus sign, it's got to be positive. What's the inverse of positive? The inverse of positive is the same as the inverse of plus. It's got to be minus. So I'm going to subtract 3 from each side. These cancel. I bring down my 3x, bring down my equal sign. 18 minus 3 is 15. Now I've got to get rid of my coefficient. This is multiplication. The opposite of multiplication is division. And I'm going to get x equals 5. And that's it. Now you know how to solve linear equations.